Tonight, on the 5th of April, 2025, an event occurred that no one saw coming, and the world's perception of air power in the Middle East will never return to what it was before. In the space of a single night, 40 of the most advanced combat aircraft ever produced, the F-35 Adir, the flagship of Israeli air superiority, each costing well over $100 million, were destroyed on the ground before a single pilot could even approach the cockpit. $4 billion of American-designed aerospace equipment disappeared into the night. This was not the work of a peer competitor armed with carrier fleets and global satellite systems, but of Iran, a nation Washington has spent the past 5 decades trying to weaken through harsh economic sanctions, covert actions, unrelenting diplomatic pressure. The weapon that delivered this blow was the Fattah 360, a precision ballistic missile that Western defense analysts had long dismissed as little more than a regional irritant, a short-range tool, mostly useful for propaganda, something that could supposedly be intercepted, neutralized, or easily managed. That miscalculation came at a devastating price last night when Israel lost its entire forward offensive air capability in one rapid strike. Nevatim Air Base, the central base for Israel's F-35 fleet and the launch pad for almost every major Israeli air operation across the region, was targeted by a carefully coordinated volley, so precise, so compressed in timing, and so overwhelming in volume that Iron Dome, David Sling, and every other layer of Israel's multi-tiered defenses could not prevent the catastrophe. By the time the smoke cleared above the Negev desert, the strategic map of the Middle East had been redrawn permanently. Israel entered the night as the undisputed dominant air force in the region. It emerged from the night as a nation suddenly lacking any meaningful offensive air arm. And Washington, which had long treated Israel's qualitative military edge as a non-negotiable cornerstone of American strategy in the Middle East, now confronts a critical gap in its regional framework that cannot be closed with emergency shipments alone. In tonight's analysis, we will take a close look at exactly how the strike unfolded. We will break down the technical features of the Fattah 360 and explain why it succeeded in defeating every defensive system thrown against it. We will explore how Iran planned and executed near-simultaneous attacks on multiple bases without triggering meaningful early warnings until the damage was already done. We will assess the consequences of losing 40 F-35s for Israel's capacity to sustain operations across all the theaters where it is currently active. And we will map out the far-reaching geopolitical consequences now radiating outward from this single night, touching Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and every major capital in the Gulf simultaneously. What actually happened last night carries deeper significance than most mainstream defense commentators are currently willing to acknowledge in public. Before we go any further, if this channel is providing you with sharper, more candid analysis than you find anywhere else, please hit like, subscribe, and share your sharpest thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps this channel remain independent and uncompromising. 3 central questions will frame tonight's full examination. First, how was Iran able to carry out coordinated strikes against several heavily fortified Israeli air bases at the same moment without generating an adequate early warning response? Second, what are the real capabilities of the Fattah 360? And why did the most expensive missile defense network in the Middle East fail so completely to stop it? Third, with Israel's F-35 fleet largely destroyed and its offensive air power crippled, what comes next? And does Washington have any realistic course of action that does not risk triggering a full-scale regional war? The answers may be uncomfortable, but they are necessary. If you have been following this channel through the escalating developments of the past few weeks, you already understand that we are not witnessing a string of random clashes. They form a deliberate, calculated, step-by-step effort to reshape the power dynamics across the Middle East, and last night marked its most significant single action. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Pass this breakdown along to anyone focused on grasping the real situation. The comments are open for discussion. Share your thoughts on what Tehran, Tel Aviv, and Washington might do next. Let's look at the actual events at Nevatim and other sites. To grasp the true scale of what unfolded last night, it helps to recognize Nevatim Air Base's central role in Israel's defense setup. This is far more than just an airport. Nevatim serves as the operational core of Israeli aerial control throughout the region. It shelters most of Israel's F-35I Adir aircraft, the world's most advanced warplanes featuring integrated sensor systems, stealth materials, and connected combat features unmatched by any other air force in the area. Virtually all major Israeli aerial assaults on Iranian targets in Syria in recent years launched from Nevatim. Every extended mission against Hezbollah's advanced rocket production sites, every secret incursion into protected airspace, all of it depended on Nevatim. Eliminating the aircraft lined up there does more than remove planes. It eliminates Israel's capacity to extend offensive reach across the entire regional arena at the same time. Iran grasped this completely. The selection of targets in last night's mission was no accident. It resulted from extended intelligence gathering, careful strategy development, and long-term readiness aimed precisely at this opportunity. The operation kicked off at 2:17 a.m. local time, a moment chosen with clear intent. Israeli defense teams were at their lowest state of readiness. The shift change had recently occurred. Activity levels at radar posts and control centers had dipped to their nighttime low. This was no random choice. Iranian strategists picked the launch timing after thorough study of Israeli defense routines, information built up over years through signal intelligence, drone surveillance, and informant networks that Western experts had often downplayed. The initial stage featured a surge of decoy drones, compact, hard-to-detect units that overwhelmed radar screens with numerous contacts from various directions at once. Israeli air defense networks suddenly had to handle hundreds of approaching signals coming from multiple paths. The systems directing Iron Dome launcher assignments and David Sling interceptions experienced what defense engineers term saturation overload. Every unit in the network started cycling through targeting routines quicker than its ability to reload allowed. This created the vulnerability as all available interceptors in the north and center of Israel focused on the decoy swarm. The Fattah 360 barrages had already lifted off from firing sites in western Iran and from mobile units positioned earlier inside Iraqi areas. Positions that Israeli detection systems were not fully positioned to monitor from the incoming flight paths used. The Fattah 360 projectiles came in clusters of 8 to 12 aimed at particular reinforced bunkers inside the Nevatim facility. The interval from the first hit to the final one lasted less than 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, Israel had no practical chance for a well-coordinated counter. The base's internal warning network was still handling the opening alert when additional waves were already descending toward impact. At the same time, and this aspect surprised IDF leadership, a separate attack group struck Ramon Air Base farther south in the Negev, where Israel had moved back up F-35s and standard F-16 aircraft as a precaution after previous tension alerts. The fact that Iran was aware of this relocation, including the exact spots inside Ramon where the planes had been shifted, points to a deep breach in Israeli operational secrecy that no Israeli official has yet confirmed openly. Yet the damage marks on the ground reveal what official statements omit. By 2:47 a.m., half an hour after the first launch was spotted, the damage report reaching IDF Air Force Command included figures that leaders at first could not accept. 40 planes verified as lost or heavily impaired. 3 reinforced shelter groups at Nevatim left structurally weakened. The main fuel and weapons depot at the site struck and in flames. Ramon's backup zone hit with similar precision. Israel's offensive aviation strength, the foundation of every part of its regional approach had been largely put out of action in a single 30-minute period. The scale of this success stands out when compared to any earlier example in regional military records. During the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel took out the Egyptian, Jordanian, and Syrian air forces in a surprise operation spanning roughly 3 hours. Last night, Iran achieved something comparable, in effect, eliminating Israel's top-tier planes on the ground in just 30 minutes using long-range ballistic weapons from more than 1,000 kilometers away against an opponent that had been on high alert for weeks and fully anticipated a strong Iranian reply. The exactness shown is the key military detail from the whole incident. Fattah 360 hits focused tightly on individual shelter areas instead of scattering over the wider base grounds. The missiles avoided runways and outer boundaries. They struck the precise coordinates of buildings, housing, and servicing the F-35s. Delivering this kind of final stage precision with a ballistic projectile over long-distance demands, exceptionally detailed targeting information, and an advanced steering mechanism. Both elements suggest capabilities that Western intelligence agencies have been hesitant to accept fully. The extent to which Iran's accurate strike technology has advanced in the last 5 years, despite total economic restrictions and technological cutoff. The Fattah 360 is the weapon that changed the equation. The Fattah 360 first drew notice in Western military circles, slowly and without much worry. Its published details, a reach of about 120 kilometers, a solid propellant engine, and a claimed accuracy in the low single-digit meters, put it in the group of short to medium-range precise ballistic tools. Observers noted it with cautious attention. It was recorded, studied, and mostly categorized as a local tactical option suited for striking stationary objectives inside a restricted area, but not a major strategic shift on the level of Iran's extended-range Shahab or Sejil models. Last night shattered that view as completely as the missiles shattered Israel's aircraft bunkers. What Western experts consistently overlooked was not the Fattah 360's distance capability. It was the blend of its end-phase steering design, its coordinated launch tactics, and the support network Iran had developed discreetly to field it in large numbers from spread-out and movable launchers across a much broader area than its listed range would indicate. Let's begin with the final guidance setup, since this is the feature that sets the Fattah 360 apart from prior Iranian ballistic designs. Standard ballistic missiles, including previous Iranian versions, travel along a mostly predictable path during most of their flight. They can be followed. Their landing spot can be estimated accurately enough to prepare an interception within the available reaction time for a capable shield system. This basic premise underlies the entire design of Israel's multi-layered missile protection network. The Fattah 360 undermines that premise during its closing stage. As the projectile moves through the final descent, an internal steering package that merges inertial positioning with an electro-optical end seeker and a radar height measurer engages and starts matching the terrain image below against a stored digital map of the objective. This is not a device merely tracking GPS signals. It actively scans the surface, recognizes particular structures, and directs itself to a chosen spot on a specific building with a level of precision that GPS by itself cannot deliver. And crucially, it achieves accuracy that GPS interference cannot reduce, since the system no longer relies on GPS during the last guidance stage. This end-seeker design accounts for two observations at once. It accounts for the remarkable precision of last night's hits, with strikes grouped tightly around chosen shelter zones rather than spread out. And it accounts for why ongoing American GPS disruption efforts across the area for weeks had little effect on Iranian attack accuracy. The engine setup adds to the defensive difficulty. Solid propellant allows the Fattah 360 to skip any liquid refueling step prior to firing. A transportable launcher can reach a prepared launch spot, set up, and fire in just minutes. The launch flash, the heat signature that orbital and aerial monitors rely on to spot firings, lasts only a brief moment compared with liquid-fueled systems. The alert window shrinks sharply. Now add the coordinated launch approach that Iran created and improved to take advantage of the reload constraints in Israel's localized defense units. One Fattah 360 launched at a protected site can potentially be stopped. The chance of interception is not zero. Iron Dome and David Sling represent real technical accomplishments and deserve credit. But Iran did not send individual missiles toward defended sites. Iran sent groups of 8 to 12 missiles at each selected target, with the entire group launched inside a window of less than 90 seconds from one launcher group, while several groups aimed at the same sites from separate directions. At once, facing a cluster of 8 missiles arriving from 2 angles inside a 30-second span, a localized defense unit encounters a numbers challenge without an easy fix. It can handle some of the approaching threats, but not everyone, and the ones it misses will hit their mark. Iran's planning group studied the engagement limits of each Israeli defense unit in the protected zone, the quantity of missiles each could address in a given period, considering its reload schedule, and set their group schedules to surpass that limit by a planned amount. This is not speculation. It reflects a detailed technical study of the opponent's protective setup applied to the task of overwhelming it. The manufacturing volume of the Fattah 360 effort adds another layer worth highlighting. These are not rare custom-built items made in limited numbers for show. Iranian production sites working under total sanctions with no access to Western parts or high-precision equipment from restricted sources have been turning out Fattah 360 units at a pace that has steadily created a stockpile with real operational substance. The missiles fired last night made up only a portion of Iran's available supply. This is not a single-use showcase. It is a lasting strike framework. The aspect of complete independence in this accomplishment should be emphasized plainly because it has consequences reaching well past this particular clash. Every element of the Fattah 360, its fuel formula, steering components, electronics, structural parts, and production equipment was created and manufactured entirely inside Iran. The sanctions framework that Washington designed specifically to block Iran from achieving this exact kind of ability has missed its main goal. Not just partly missed, entirely missed. What the sanctions actually created, the result that few in Western policy circles want to say directly, is an Iranian military manufacturing sector that is now more independent, more durable, and better able to withstand outside stress than it would have been if Iran could have bought weapons openly on the world market. Isolation drove creativity. Need generated technical answers that bot systems would never have inspired because imported weapons do not force the user to master them at the depth needed to construct them independently. Iran developed the Fattah 360 from the ground up. That explains its performance, and that explains why no Western sanctions effort can remove it. The worldwide defense establishment is now urgently reviewing every Iranian ballistic design that received similar low estimates before. If the Fattah 360's final precision and group launch methods reflect the overall approach used throughout Iran's missile lineup, then the risk assessment for every U.S. base, every partner facility, and every naval unit within reach of Iranian firing positions must be completely updated. That review is underway now in secure locations in Washington, London, and Tel Aviv. The findings are not easy to accept. Washington's reply hesitation from the podium. Shortly after the Nevatim attacks, the White House Crisis Center was fully active. The National Security Council held an urgent meeting. The Joint Chiefs Chairman joined via secure link with CENTCOM Command in Qatar. The Secretary of State contacted every Gulf ally at once. Yet from all that intense effort, the public message that came out was one of serious worry, a renewed pledge of U.S. support for Israel's safety, and a plea for everyone involved to show calm. That term hit Tel Aviv like another blow. To appreciate how deeply Washington is stalled at this point, consider the practical challenge the Fattah 360 attack has posed for U.S. military strategists, not only in political terms, but in straightforward operational ones. The usual U.S. approach to a big Iranian escalation follows a set pattern. First, show strong air presence by positioning carrier groups and sending bombers to the area. Second, give Iran a believable warning of severe counteraction against its own forces. Third, apply that warning to push for calm through private talks. Fourth, if talks fall short, carry out targeted hits on Iranian military sites that weaken abilities without starting a full-scale regional fight. Each part of that approach now runs into obstacles that were not present 2 days ago. Step 1, showing air presence means shifting carrier groups closer. But recent moves pulling American carriers back from the Gulf of Oman after Iran displayed its anti-ship missile strength mean the closest U.S. naval aviation is now working from greater distances that cut down the speed and scale of attack missions it can launch. Bringing carriers back into the Gulf would mean accepting dangers that U.S. naval leaders have clearly shown they prefer to avoid. Step 2, issuing a believable counter-threat requires Iran to accept that the threat would actually be carried out. Yet, Iran's actions last night destroying 40 F-35s inside protected shelters at the best defended air installation in the Middle East show a leadership view that U.S. counteraction will be limited by precisely the same limits, now openly restricting it. Tehran's choice to launch last night's attack itself signaled that they do not expect Washington's response to be without bounds. Step 3, private diplomatic channels need a counterpart that sees itself at a disadvantage and thus wants to talk. Iran this morning does not feel that way. Iran this morning holds the initiative in the confrontation. Step 4, targeted strikes on Iranian military sites run straight into the issue that U.S. planners have struggled to resolve for years. What exactly do you target Iran's missile units are spread across movable platforms and fortified underground sites across a huge national area? A focused campaign against Iranian missile setups would have to be large in scope and prolonged to cause real damage. Large and prolonged equals escalation. Escalation equals Iran mobilizing its entire regional proxy network, Hezbollah, Houthi units, Iraqi armed groups, all at once. And that leads to a regional conflict of a size and difficulty that U.S. military analysts, when modeling honestly, cannot promise will end favorably inside a reasonable expense range. This is the true cause of Washington's hesitation. It is not simply political caution. It is the awareness that the available military choices come with expenses that no government can accept without serious fallout. The urgent resupply issue makes things worse. Israel has lost 40 F-35s. The total global inventory of U.S. Air Force F-35A models is around 450 planes. Sending replacements to Israel at the pace required would mean taking them from currently active units, lowering U.S. air strength in other areas at the same time. The rate of building new F-35s, though, higher than ever in the program, cannot close a 4-0 plane shortfall in anything shorter than several years under regular delivery plans. There is also an issue that no one in official Washington wants to raise openly, but every defense observer is considering quietly. If Nevatim could be hit with this level of precision and concentration, what does that suggest about the exposure of U.S. air installations in the area, Al Udeid in Qatar, Al Dhafra in the UAE and Sirleaf in Turkey? These are not reinforced sites built to withstand the kind of focused, accurate ballistic attack Iran carried out last night. They are standard airfields in open terrain with well-known positions facing an opponent that has just shown it can strike a particular aircraft shelter area from over 10 kilometers away. The Pentagon's quiet response on this point is telling in itself. Gulf countries are observing Washington's actions with close interest. Every Gulf kingdom that has tied its defense setup to expectations of U.S. military leadership is now doing an urgent review. Saudi Arabia, which has been exploring its own discreet talks with Tehran, sees last night's developments as proof that the path of engagement should speed up. The UAE, home to U.S. military sites, is weighing how much hosting those sites now turns its own land into a possible objective in ways it wasn't before. The political terrain under American regional strategy is changing faster than the usual systems of U.S. diplomacy can handle. Israel's critical self-assessment, the close of air dominance. For 75 years, Israeli defense thinking has relied on one central element: total control of the skies, the power to attack anywhere in the region whenever needed with accuracy and without risk. This goes beyond simple military capacity. It forms the mental basis of Israeli deterrence. It assures that no opponent, no matter how many missiles they gather or how many troops they assemble, can force a price on Israel that Israel cannot answer with superior force from above. Last night, that foundation took a direct hit at its core. 40 destroyed F-35s amount to roughly 60% of Israel's active Adir squadron. The remaining planes, now scattered to civilian fields and lesser military sites nationwide in an urgent bid to save what remains, face ongoing risk from any future Iranian attack on those new positions. Every hour without a follow-up strike is an hour Iran has chosen to hold back, meaning Iran sets the rhythm of what follows. Israel's power to control the speed of the confrontation has been seriously upset. The direct operational effects spread in all directions. Operations in Gaza, which have counted on steady Israeli air backing throughout, are now running with far fewer planes available. Activity levels have fallen noticeably. The overhead support that Israeli ground troops counted on as an advantage is weakened. Field leaders, who spent months counting on quick air cover, are now in a changed setting. The northern border with Hezbollah, partly kept in check by the unspoken possibility of Israeli strikes on Hezbollah command and facilities in Lebanon, has shifted nature suddenly. Hezbollah's leaders in Beirut realize that the Israeli Air Force now works under tight limits. The restraining effect of Israeli air strength on Hezbollah moves has decreased markedly. Hezbollah's thinking about its own attacks has adjusted as a result. In Syria, where Israel had carried out frequent air missions against Iranian arms shipments to Hezbollah, the area is now basically off limits for Israeli aviation until the plane shortage is fixed. Those arms movements will proceed without interference. The financial side adds to the military harm. Each F-35 Adir runs about $100 million at today's prices. 40 planes equal $4 billion in immediate equipment loss, not counting the arms, fuel, gear, and base support ruined along with them in the collapsed shelters. Israel's full-year defense spending is around $24 billion. A $4 billion sudden loss from one attack has no recent parallel in Israeli military records. Coverage for military equipment at this level simply does not exist. Every dollar needed for replacements must come from the national funds from U.S. military assistance, or from a mix of both. Requests for extra emergency funding from Congress require time, at least weeks or months, when politics are divided. In the meantime, Israel deals with the capability shortfall. The mental effect on the Israeli public merits its own attention because it works on a different, more profound level than the physical losses. Past occasional shortfalls in Iron Dome could be accepted since overall success rates stayed strong and the image of Israeli military superiority held. But 40 F-35s wrecked on the ground at Israel's key air facility is not a minor system error. It is a basic violation of the core promise. The promise that Israeli military technology, supported by American military technology, delivers a degree of protection that no nearby opponent can break through. That promise now appears limited. It breaks under certain circumstances, and Iran has just shown openly for the whole region and the world to see that it understands those circumstances exactly and knows how to bring them about. The political fallout inside Israel is starting to appear. Partners in the governing group are pressing for answers that the leadership cannot give without admitting the complete extent of the intelligence shortfall that let Iran prepare and carry out this attack without proper advance notice. The opposition is pushing for urgent meetings. The public is raising the issue that earlier Israeli administrations had managed to keep from becoming the main public concern. Is the existing defense arrangement truly effective? Last night's response, spelled out in the flaming shelters across the Negev, offers little comfort. The worldwide realignment. A fresh Middle East is emerging. Step back from the immediate military and political emergency and consider what last night signifies on the level of the larger international system. Because the loss of 40 Israeli F-35s to Iranian ballistic missiles is more than a regional military incident. It is one piece of a broader pattern of change that has been speeding up over recent years, and last night's developments may mark the point where that pattern could no longer be reversed. The Middle Eastern setup after the Cold War rested on certain core beliefs. U.S. military leadership could not be challenged. Israel's technological military advantage was assured and lasting. No local player, whatever its beliefs or how many arms it gathered, could seriously endanger the basic security structure backed by American strength. Countries that went along with this setup gained protection, pledges, and entry to U.S. economic and diplomatic help. Countries that opposed it faced full-scale pressure, sanctions, isolation, hidden actions, and the ongoing unspoken possibility of armed intervention. Iran opposed this setup. For 45 years, Iran endured the strongest pressure the world's leading power could apply. And last night, Iran eliminated 60% of the most advanced combat jets ever created at the most protected military site in the Middle East. The signal this sends to every government worldwide, and especially to every administration in the developing world, weighing its ties to American influence, is clear. The signal is that the setup can be changed. American leadership has boundaries, and a country that focuses on true independence, that creates its own technology, that develops its own strategic reserves, can reach a stage where it influences the regional setup instead of accepting one forced from abroad. Russia is studying last night's events closely from Moscow with restrained approval. Every hour that U.S. strategic focus and armed resources are tied up in the Middle Eastern situation is an hour that weakens Western ability to keep pressure elsewhere. The distracting benefit of a prolonged Middle Eastern crisis for Russian strategic goals is substantial. Moscow does not need to take direct steps. The events are creating benefits on their own. China's view from Beijing is more layered and looks further ahead. Beijing regards last night's events as both an immediate chance and a longer-term confirmation. The immediate chance as U.S. standing in the region takes hits, and Gulf states start spreading their defense ties. China's economic and diplomatic role in the area grows more useful to more parties at once. The longer-term confirmation, China's own efforts in area denial technology, its own precise ballistic missile stockpile meant to block U.S. carrier actions in the Western Pacific, has now seen a smaller version of that same approach succeed in actual combat conditions. Every insight Iran gained while carrying out last night's attack is an insight that Chinese military planners can apply. The Gulf kingdoms are carrying out the most pressing review. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, every state that has linked its defense to American assurances is now comparing those assurances to the clear evidence from last night. The Saudi-Iranian diplomatic opening, arranged with Chinese help and finalized in Beijing, appears more far-sighted looking back. The countries that have balanced between the U.S. protection net and local understanding with Iran are speeding up that balancing act. The countries that stayed fully aligned with the American setup are quietly questioning whether total alignment still makes sense. Turkey, a NATO participant that has followed its own multifaceted foreign approach for the past 10 years, is observing with strategic concern that goes beyond alliance ties. Ankara's connections with both Washington and Tehran have always been complicated. Last night brought added layers. Pakistan, which has kept a delicate equilibrium between its U.S. defense links and its closeness to Iran, is adjusting its calculations. India, with significant business stakes in Iranian energy and projects, is adjusting. Every country that has shaped its external policy based on unchallenged U.S. leadership in the Middle East is adjusting. This is how a real turning point in global politics appears while it is happening. It does not come with one loud announcement. It appears through countless simultaneous adjustments occurring in capitals everywhere, each prompted by the understanding that the working assumptions guiding yesterday's choices no longer fit today's reality so neatly. The period of unchallenged Western military leadership in the Middle East, the period that started with the 1991 Gulf War and hit its high point with the 2003 Iraq invasion, has been slowly fading for some time. Last night may mark the moment that fading moved from steady to final. A new Middle East is taking shape. Its structure will not be drawn up in Washington or enforced by U.S. military dominance. It will be worked out among local players who have shown or are showing that they hold real control over their own security situations. Iran has secured its place in those discussions through proven ability, not through polite diplomacy. The world that comes out of this change will be more truly multipolar, more intricate, less foreseeable, and often less steady in the near term than the system it replaces. But it will rest on a firmer base. The base of actual strength, actual ability, and actual national independence, rather than the maintained illusion of lasting American leadership that the 40 burning aircraft shelters from last night have now clearly ended. What took place last night at Nevatim Air Base was not just a military clash. It was a historic statement etched in flames across the Negev desert, announcing that the previous guidelines of the Middle Eastern power contest have been replaced for good. Iran's Fattah 360 did not only eliminate 40 planes, it eliminated the belief in Israeli air invulnerability. It eliminated the reliability of American deterrence in its existing shape. It eliminated the easy assumption that technological advantage and partnership support ensure protection against a resolute, independent opponent that has spent decades readying itself for precisely this situation. Israel begins this morning lacking an offensive air arm. Washington begins this morning lacking a straightforward military path that does not risk widespread escalation dangers. And Tehran begins this morning having shown every government on the planet that true strategic independence is not merely an ideal, it is a practical military reality. And last night, it succeeded. The following question, the one that will shape the coming stage of this confrontation, is whether anyone on the opposing side has the strategic insight to see that the old approach is over and that the only route to a steady regional setup goes through dialogue within Iran that has now shown beyond serious dispute that it cannot be forced into yielding. As the smoke continues to rise over the Negev desert, the Middle East stands at a historic inflection point. What unfolded on the night of the 5th of April, 2025, was far more than a tactical strike. It was the dramatic unmasking of long-building vulnerabilities in the post-Cold War security architecture. Israel's once unquestioned air dominance has been severely compromised, forcing a painful reassessment of its deterrence, posture, and operational doctrine. Washington faces an equally stark reality. Its traditional playbook of carrier diplomacy, rapid resupply, and limited strikes now carries unacceptable risks of uncontrollable escalation. Yet amid the uncertainty lies opportunity. This moment could compel all parties, Tehran, Tel Aviv, and Washington, to confront the limits of military supremacy and explore genuine diplomatic pathways that acknowledge new power realities on the ground. Iran has proven that determined self-reliance and innovative missile technology can rewrite regional equations even against overwhelming odds. The coming weeks will reveal whether leaders choose escalation born of pride or negotiation rooted in pragmatism. History will judge not just the weapons used last night, but the wisdom or lack thereof with which the region responds. The old order is burning. What rises from the ashes remains to be written. That question lacks an easy response, but it is the correct one, and this channel will continue to examine every step as the response forms. What is your view? Can Israel rebuild its air strength quickly enough to make a difference? Does Washington possess a workable military choice, or has Iran now changed the equilibrium in ways that no aid effort can undo? Share your thoughts in the comments past this video to anyone seriously interested in what is really developing. Like, subscribe, and remain with U.S. Command in Sync, where the examination reaches further than anywhere else. Until the next report, stay alert, stay informed, and keep raising the issues that conventional sources avoid.